on stood over there.
I don't want to walk in front of the shot just in case something happens, but...
That's cool. Is it on running?
It's on and whenever you're ready, young man.
Superb. So you grew up in Harlow?
Good morning, I'll just introduce myself as Simon Carter. I moved to Harlow in 1956. My family were the third family to move into Upper Park in Little Parndon. That was quite an interesting day. It was in November and it was chucking down with rain. They hadn't built the roads and the pavements at that stage, so my poor mother had to cover the floor of the house in newspapers as the removal people were moving stuff in and out. It was still that new that so the roads hadn't been built, the gardens hadn't been laid. The following year, November '57, my father built a very nice little bonfire at the end of the garden. It rained the week before, and the bonfire was actually covered or surrounded by water. So my father spent the winter digging trenches in the garden to help drain it.
What was it like growing up as a youngster in Harlow?
Absolutely fabulous, absolutely interesting, because construction in Upper Park was still going on. We didn't have health and safety issues like we do these days. You could just wander around the building site. Absolutely, for a young boy growing up, I was in 6, 7 and 8. So lots of things to play with and so forth. And also later on they started building Princess Alexandra Hospital just behind Upper Park, and you could sort of just wander over there in the evenings when the building had stopped, and there were huge trenches, probably 8-10 feet deep, that you could sort of clamber down into and wander around and climb up again. Lots of places to explore, lots of things to do, lots of things to play with. And as time went on and more and more houses got built and more children came along, we used to wander around and play games, cowboy games and hide and seek and things like this.
So was that one of your favourite pastimes, running around in trenches and building sites?
Yes, it probably was. And I also remember in the summer of '57, there was a painter painting garages and the houses, and I'd go along and bother him for hours on end and just chat away about what he was doing and what his background was. I didn't do any painting, we didn't get as far as that, but it was something to do. And also in Little Parndon there's a playing field down in Foldcroft, which is still there, but it's probably half a mile, 3/4 mile away from home. You go out on your own, go out on your cycle, and you meet your friends down there and play around. And there's a nice big field, there's a stream you go and play in and build dams and things like that, and see them constructing the golf course at Cannonsbrook as well. I think the big difference now is we did have so much more freedom. So much more freedom then. Tell your mother you were going down to Foldcroft, you knew where it was, you'd be back for tea, and that was it. And you disappear for hours with your friends, and nobody. Well, obviously people were concerned, but there wasn't this close protection that the children seem to have these days. And you go out and play around and run around and do things.
So that definitely seems better for you to have grown up then than now.
I think so, yes. Obviously we didn't have computer games and mobile phones and so forth, and once you went out then you were out, and you were isolated. So having that freedom to go where you wanted to go where you were go with your friends, I think gave you a lot more confidence into growing up. You had your own challenges. Did you climb that tree or not? Did you jump down that ditch or not? And you could test yourself. Yeah, you got hurt. You come home with bumps and scratches, and a mother would wash you down, and away you went. And it was a way of testing your own boundaries as to what you could do physically, what you had the courage to do, and what you didn't do.
So I understand that you went to Burnt Mill, one of the first intake. that correct?
Yes, I didn't start at Burnt Mill. The first year of Burnt Mill was actually held in Stewards because the actual building of the school wasn't finished. I came along towards the end of the second year, which I think is probably year 6 these days, because my family moved away and then moved back. But I was then in the first year, which then stayed as the top year all the way through. You know, it grew from underneath. So in terms of responsibility, we were always the top year. We were the ones who were setting the trend, setting the standards, and so you know we would have been taught prefects in the 5th year or whatever that year is. Again in the 60s, Burnt Mill had its own 6th form, and I stayed all the way through to the 6th form. So we were always the top. Trying to think. Again, we lived in Upper Park again, and travelled to Burnt Mill, either walked or cycled, and again saw that was all done sort of unprotected. If you were late home, you were late home, and it was interesting because Burnt Mill, I think, was the first designed comprehensive school in Harlow. Let me just pause for a minute. So I had an elder brother who went to Newport school because he went to a grammar school and carried on going to grammar school, whereas I went to a comprehensive school. And so the methods of teaching, the styles of teaching were a little bit different. There was some streaming and there were other non-stream activities as well, which I suppose is similar to what goes on these days. I'll say, so being the top year was always a bit of a challenge because you were first to do things and you were setting the standards. And we did the usual things, the usual courses. There's nothing particularly remarkable. I think what was remarkable were the calibre of the teachers that we had. I'm not saying the calibre of the teachers now are bad, but you do remember the inspiring leading teachers. Ray Sterling was the head teacher then. He was a great advocate for comprehensive education, which I think was why he was selected. And he was all very much a hands-on teacher, always involved, knew all the pupils and so forth. And there were quite a number of teachers that you do remember. One in particular was a guy called Ken Taylor, who was one of the art teachers. And he looked like an art teacher. He was sort of slightly dishevelled and unkempt, but again, he was a great teacher, and so somebody you could actually connect with and relate to. And one of his great achievements was creating the stained glass windows in the stairwells. I don't know if everybody remembers those here, but around November time, there'll be a competition to actually design a theme for the 2 big stairwells on a 4-storey block, and then it's all great fun. Took about a week or so to actually put up. So we'll be sort of cutting out all the crepe paper into the shapes and actually sort of physically fixing it to the windows, which again these days I suspect would not be allowed under health and safety because you were sort of going up ladders and this kind of thing. And they became a feature for very many years. I can't remember exactly when it died out. So those driving down First Avenue would see in the evenings these 2 great stairwells lit up. And that was the sort of kind of inspirational leading things that we were doing.
What was the physical education like, sports like at Burnt Mill back then?
I suppose these days quite basic. We played soccer in the autumn, rugby in the winter, and athletics in the summertime. We did have a swimming pool, and we did have a very good swimming team. We did reasonably well at athletics. We had a fairly small gym. Looking back on it, for the size of the school, because most of the physical activities would have been intended to be done outside. And you would share your PE between the gym and the swimming pool. The sports hall that they got there sort of came along much later. But it was interesting. I mean, we sort of talk about spending cuts and so forth these days. But Burt Mill was late being opened because of delays in the budget. And then when they came to expand it, by the time we reached what was then the lower sixth common room was a storeroom underneath the stage, which these days just wouldn't be allowed on health and safety grounds. There was only one entrance to it. There was no ventilation, there was no illumination, no windows. Only about a quarter of the area had sufficient ceiling height to stand up straight. You had to sort of bend down and go under beams and things to get into the main area. And it was great in the lower six because you could sort of bury yourself down there and sort of get your card scores out and everything else like this. But in terms of health and safety, absolute nightmare. But again, it was a venture. We certainly liked it and certainly enjoyed it.
Do you have any fond memories at Burt Mill? Like one of your best memories that you can remember?
Lots. I used to get involved in organising the end of term dances, and sort of doing the decorations and doing the lighting, designing the tickets and that kind of thing. They were always all great, obviously great social events. For about 3 or 4 of those we had. And obviously the friendships you build up. In the sixth form I did geography's A level, and we went away for a few field trips, went up to the Lake District and things like that. And sorry. And the teachers, again, there was a few inspiring teachers. Sadly this morning I can't remember their names, but and I say, the friendships we build up. I'm still in touch with about 4 or 5 of people I was at school at. Probably more in the sixth form because that's where you sort of tend to focus a bit more. And we still meet up, sort of about once a year and sort of go out for a meal and what have you. Reminisce about the good old days.
Was it the school quite disciplined, like strict on the students?
Yes, they probably were. The deputy head was a guy called Gordon Godsman, who he made sort of discipline his particular responsibility, and you have to walk in the corridors and walk on the left hand side of the corridors in single file and no talking and no running and this kind of thing. And yes, there'll be detentions. But again, sort of compared with these days, there was a lot more respect anyway to begin with. So when the teacher came into the room, you stopped talking. I'm not sure we actually stood up when they came in. It wasn't quite as bad as that, but so sort of behaviour was a lot better. There'll be sort of fights in the playground and things like this from time to time. And if you're late with your homework, you might have to write another essay, or there may be detention, things like that. But behaviour was good, but you knew if you stepped out of line, then yes, you would be punished for it.
Okay, that's actually all the questions I've got. So if there's anything else you want to add that we haven't covered, feel free.
Blimey. That's pretty much the things I came across as well.
So that sort of covers the education side, and something we were talking about earlier, because Simon grew up in Harlow. Might be interesting to sort of look at issues about growing up in Harlow. I mean, clearly school is part of that, and you mentioned about early life, climbing in and out of 8-foot trenches on building sites, but perhaps other aspects, more adolescence. Well, clubs, dances.
Yeah, what sort of entertainment was there around for a teenager growing up
Yeah.
in Harlow then?
Gosh.
Bikes, motorbikes, mods and rockers.
Did you have the cinema then in the town centre, which is now gone, of course?
Yes, yes, I'm glad you reminded me about that. Yes, I mean, sort of growing up, we used to have the, sort of, where are we, sort of late 60s, early 70s, used to have the Saturday morning cinema club. Sort of kids sort of turn up at 8:30 and sort of line up outside, and you sort of get a sort of cowboy film and a cartoon and sort of lots of hissing and booing and stuff like that. And you have a compare to introduce the films and tell a few jokes and things like that. So yes, that was one thing. There were some youth clubs which I didn't go to. Music was very big in those days as well. A lot of schools had their own music schools on Saturday mornings, and in fact, about 64, 65, the Development Corporation commissioned a film, The Faces of Harlow, to show the new town, what sort of living in Newtown was like. And the guy who actually made the film, Derek Knight, he picked up on this music thing, and he sold an idea to the BBC about music in Harlow. I think both of these films are now available on YouTube if you search for Harlow. And I featured briefly in both of those, once in Burt Mill School, well, twice in Burt Mill School, once actually in a class, and then also as part of the choir at Burt Mill. We used to sing in that. What else did I do? There'll be the sports clubs as well, the games. I used to play for Burt Mill rugby team on Saturday mornings, so that'll be something else to do. I mean, the only entertainment, I think we probably, did we have ITV in those days? I mean, probably only had BBC. So TV didn't sort of feature a great deal. Probably certainly radio, because we had the pirate radio station, Radio Caroline, Radio London. So they were sources of new music. And there'll be parties you go to, birthday parties and things like that. And then of course you reach the sort of grand age of 17 and getting your driving licences for motorbikes, and a few people got scooters. But we're mostly mods, I think, at a bit more with Parkers and things. And then sort of getting onto cars. We had great fun. The Easter of the upper six, we should have been studying, revising grade levels. But about about 2 carloads took off to Wales. And we missed about 2 days worth of school, and we sort of got back, and their teachers sort of summoned us to study, and so we knew we should have been in school on those 2 days and urgently revising. So the next holiday we actually had to go into school and revise, and so that was our punishment. But it was great because you had the run of the school and the library to do the revision with. And so most of us got by. I didn't go to university. I wasn't studying enough, but most of those people want to go to university went to university. Although one of my friends actually deferred his year at Leeds and went off to Botswana with the voluntary service overseas.
Simon, is it worth just checking on some dates? If you can remember.
Right,
so the date you moved first
right.
to Harlow?
I moved to Harlow in 1956 the first time, and then we moved away whilst I was still at primary school, so that would have been probably about 1960. Moved to Reading, and then we moved back again. I think it must have been 63. Yes, towards the end of 63, which would have then been the end of the second year at Burt Mill. And then I sort of stayed at Burt Mill all the way through. My parents moved away at the end of 67, and I stayed with some friends for 2 terms, and then I came back to Harlow in '74 when I got married. As I said, I never worked in Harlow. My wife worked in the town centre, and I used to commute. And we were there. We lived in Park Court. Couldn't afford a car. Couldn't drive. Did acquire a car after a few years. Then we moved to the Swallows when our son was born. Then we moved away again in. Nick was born in '81, so I think we moved away about '82 to Ipswich. Then came back again about '86 to Markham Moors. And again, I was working in London and travelling, and stayed ever since. Then sort of started getting involved in politics when we came back. That would have been in the early '90s, I suppose. I was elected as a councillor in '94 to '98, and then re-elected in 2000. I've been a councillor ever since.
And so, can I ask your date of birth, just to put it in the context?
Of course, yes, 5th of February 1950.
1950. Yeah.
So it's nice and easy to remember how old you are. You just take 50 years off.
Yeah. So you're 6 when you moved to Harlow, and that was what was the name of the estates?
Upper Park.
Upper Park.
Yeah.
Upper Park.
Yeah.
And these places are all still here.
Oh,
They're all
yeah,
still
yeah.
there.
Well, again, we'll talk about the exploring, running around as a youngster. Of course, the town centre was still being built. Talk about the cinema. I remember being sort of chased away by the watchman on Sunday morning because we were sort of breaking through. They did actually have a fence around that, and we sort of friends and I went up there and tried to get in, but the watchman, what they called him, sort of chased it away. That was quite good fun. But yeah, I mean, sort of seeing sort of Turner Street being built and the water gardens being built and this kind of thing. And you sort of see how things are put together, which I suppose gave me exposure to my interest in architecture. I can sort of bore you for hours about Harlow and sort of being a design new town and Freddie Gibbon and the master plan, and sort of bringing the countryside into the town, which is why you have high density estates, but then lots of green spaces in between. That's how it worked. And then you've got sort of Sumners and Catherine Sumners came along in the first phase of expansion, and then Church Langley in the third phase, which are, if you like, sort of bolt-ons to the original design. And of course, you've sort of got the employment areas separated, and you have sort of main arterial roads going through, so you don't have housing directly onto the main roads. One of Freddie Gibbon's original intentions was, he knew that, sort of realised that car ownership, vehicle ownership would increase. So on main avenues, First Avenue, Second Avenue, Third Avenue, Fourth Avenue, Fifth Avenue, were wide enough to expand into dual carriageways. But the planning authorities over the years never really wanted to do that, and so we have a lot of the congestion we have today. If you go around to places like Basildon and Milton Keynes, the main routes are dual carriageway, and sort of traffic. Still get traffic queues, but traffic does flow a lot more easily.
So did you get an opportunity of meeting any of these architects, or that was a bit late? I guess that was finishing by the time you became aware of...
Well, no, the town, the town continued to be built, and I suppose it finished probably around 1980s. And at that sort of age, you weren't interested in that kind of detail. You were sort of just aware that sort of different houses were being built in different designs, using different materials. And occasionally you stop and think, well, why are they doing that? Why are they doing that? But no, that interest only sort of came much later. Probably when I came back and having sort of lived in other towns and seeing how they worked and how they'd sort of grown and been developed, and that you then realise how organised Harlow actually is in terms of residential areas, employment areas, retail areas, the school, so where the schools and the shops and things are. Hopefully you are aware of the Harlow Design Guide.
Yes.
That was a very new creation that was only done about a year or two ago.
Okay, there was the Essex Design Guide, wasn't there?
There've been two of those, and they're now thinking about doing the third one. Yes, the Essex Design Guide, probably not all of it can relate to Harlow, because it sort of does cover obviously the whole of the county, a lot of which is rural.
Yes.
So there are there are different standards there, but some of the local architects and planners thought it would be a great idea, particularly with the coming expansion of Harlow, so Harlow North, Harlow West, and so forth, to update the Gibbon principles rather than the Essex Design Guide, to try and keep that theme running through. We've had this big debate about Gildon Way. Unfortunately, we lost the argument on that. What we hope to do is, when the detail applications come through, apply the Essex Design Guide and improve the actual design, because the design that the developers actually put through was barbaric, basically. There were just terraces of houses and a few flats and what have you. There was no imagination.
Which development is this on?
Sorry, Gildon Way.
Gildon Way.
Don't ask me who the developers are. But I'd say what we want to do is when they actually come through with detail application,
Yes.
we can make sure they actually apply.
And who's we in this context there, Simon?
Oh, well, yeah, a good question. I was part of the administration until May last year.
Yes.
We'd run the council for 4 years before that, and that was when the design guide came through. And I did attend a couple of the workshops on the design guide. But certainly in terms of growth, there is a cross-party agreement on sort of what we want to do to the town. So all the parties and the MP and all the residents were against that Gildon Way application. We knew, sort of just on the Gildon Way, it's been known it's going to be built on for the last 25 years. In fact, Harlow Council put in the first planning application for it 25 years ago, and they actually paid for an option to acquire the land. So that was sort of 20, 25 years ago. So it's always been known it's going to be built on at some stage as a sort of last resort. Unfortunately, the planners or developers were able to take advantage of a gap in legislation to put their application in and make sure it was approved. And it's one of the sort of quirks of the planning system at the moment. They couldn't have done it 12 months ago, and they probably won't be able to do it in 12 months' time.
Oh, I see.
It's sort of just
Right.
it's the movement between the regional spatial strategy, which was under the previous Labour government, which was formally dumped on December the 3rd last year, and before you actually have your local development framework, which is the new plan. All the work's been done for it. Basically, all we have to do is agree it, and sort of just making sure it sort of conforms to the latest guidance. Sorry, I'm not boring you.
Is that expansion part of the Harlow Enterprise Zone at all, or is that a completely separate?
No, the Gildon Way is not. That's been part of the overall framework for the town.
Yes.
It's a site of it's a special restraint area in SRA. It's been earmarked, but it won't be built on until there's nowhere else to build.
Right.
Newhall was an SRA in the sort of 1996 plan, whatever it was. So we knew in 15 years' time. I mean, when you have these local plans or local development frameworks, one of the things you have to do is to build in or identify land for housing growth over the next 10 years. So you don't have to update the plan every year. These plans are only done about every 10 or 15 years. So you have to build in where the next lot of residential or employment land is going to go. It's just a question of sort of when it's actually needed and when the money is available. The enterprise zone is the land at the end of River Way, behind Harlow Mill Station, and the Nortel site.
Yeah, which is closer to Church Langley, isn't it?
Sorry?
Closer to Church Langley, that old Nortel site, or?
Well, strictly speaking, it's closer to Newhall, but yes, it's on that side of town. The council approved some plans December, January, as to sort of confirming the boundaries, and also the planning brief as to what they expect to happen in those areas. Newhall was an SRA, that's now being developed, and that will sort of fill all of that sort of space between Church Langley and Old Harlow. But what we want to do with the council wants to do with the enterprise zone is to push a road through from the other side of the railway line into River Way, and then the bigger scheme is to have junction 7A with the motorway. There is a plan that's being worked on by the County Council and Highways Authority, which, if you read the letter in the Star yesterday from Councillor Mike Garnett, you will see runs from the roundabout at Markhall School
Yes, I did
down
read that
Gilden
yesterday.
Way, and then across where that very nice butcher and baker and the shops are,
That farm
across
shop.
the valley, across the junction. That's about £56 million. What we all want is to actually extend the 414 outside Harlow across this side of Pishobury Drive,
Go further on.
and to go across that way. But unfortunately, that's all low-lying marshy land. It costs an arm and a leg to build foundations and so forth, and it won't happen.
Sorry, I
but
digress for a bit of personal knowledge of where I live.
but yes, the junction is sort of tied in with the enterprise zone, because that will then sort of feed in directly to both the enterprise zone sites.
No, that's wrong.
Okay,
Actually, do you want to take, if you take Simon down?
and I'll see if we've got Angela
Yeah.
or Michael.
Yeah, that's great.
Are you all right then?
Yep.
James, have you got what you need?
Yep, super.
That one gives you a 5-minute break while we just
Yeah.
do the crossover.
That's great. No, very interesting. Because one of the things, another little project we're working on is
James, I don't
architecture in
know
Harlow.
whether you've got chats
Excellent.
with Chris
Great.
to
And
set up
I'm no
your
expert in architecture, but just be going around taking some
Because
shots
we
this
haven't got
morning,
the
because
same
only the school,
data
Pear Tree
on
Mead
you.
School, said
They've got two
can
people
we
around
come in
at
and
the
talk
same
to the
time.
kids about
Because I had to
architecture,
do
and
that
as
in
they're only
interviews.
about 8 years old,
I don't know
I
whether-
feel I can reasonably qualified to talk about
Excuse me, set
architecture
up,
to
and then if
8-year-olds.
we do need to use it,
Yes.
specialists.
Yeah, that's
then-
fine.
yeah,
Um,
I'll put my coat
yes,
on,
I
'cause it's
mean,
cold out there.
Why are houses
Thank
built
you.
like they are?
Yeah.
So why do you have sort of shops there and then